I remember being too drunk to go to the hospital when one of my roommates was admitted for alcohol poisoning. I remember thinking his boyfriend could go instead. Besides, I was dancing to beat the devil with my friends, and that kind of dancing does not happen in medical corridors. Besides, I spent what little money I had on this buzz, and I wasn't going to waste it. It pains me now to say out loud the level of selfishness I exhibited. It was a few months later when a strong realization hit me. I was going nowhere fast. My service industry jobs weren't keeping up with my basic daily needs and my drinking habit. I was less than a paycheck from ruin. Okay, I was in my late teens and early 20s. You have to excuse the drama. And as far as I could see, there was nothing that was going to happen to change this. I barely had a high school diploma and low self-esteem. At first, this led to crying, drinking, and then more crying. And of course, my friends understood. They were in the same situation as me. They loved me. They cared about me. You know, misery loves company, particularly if I was buying. And I was. Or at least keeping their loneliness at bay and doing whatever they asked. I was codependent, but I didn't have a word for it. I knew I was being used, and I knew I was using because I had made bad choices that had made sense at the time, but now I wondered. They weren't really friends. But I couldn't do this alone. Anyway, maybe this was better than home. Maybe. But this motherless child, she has a mother and a father and 4 siblings. Do I go home? Do I risk it? Do I risk rejection, being unappreciated, misunderstood, unwanted? Again? I mean, they moved from Iowa back to Michigan and didn't even tell me. I may not have much of a degree in high school, but I can take a hint. At this time in my life, sighing was my new mode of breathing. I was quite sure there wasn't a place for me in this world. I wasn't suicidal, but I certainly felt despair. Where do I fit in? I was increasingly uncomfortable in my own skin and in my own head. I made one more sigh and called. My mother answered. I told her I wanted to come home. Behind that simple longing, I silently screamed, I want home to be home. Can you make it that? As the Dalai Lama stated, home is where you feel at home and are treated well. I ached for unconditional love and acceptance. Her answer was, of course. Tentatively, I ventured, and everything is okay? I mean, everyone's getting along? Oh, yes, better than ever. Better than ever. Better than ever. Those words echoed and fueled my imagination as I made arrangements to say goodbye. My best friend tried to understand and couldn't. Her coldness was so bitter, and then she would warm as she tried to convince me to stay. After all, I was choosing my family of origin over my family of choice. And it hurts to not be the one chosen. Drinks were bought for me and promises were made. promises that felt false and too full of maybes. All the some days couldn't compete with my mother's promise of better than ever. So I packed. That morning of the move, I was drunk with just 3 hours of sleep. Thankfully, most of my things had already been packed. It was just the heavy lifting. My father drove from Michigan to help me with the move. When he arrived, he hugged me, but was by and large silent. As I pulled away, the mantra was now a hallelujah chorus of hope over tearful goodbyes. You know, you could just stay, my friends said. I couldn't hear them. I was chasing a deep wish. The rearview mirror showed the weight limit of the trailer. Was that the weight I was leaving behind or carrying with me? Well, I had 10 hours to think about it. 10 long hours. Pulling in behind the 200-year-old house my family was remodeling, I still didn't have my answers. My sign had returned. I sat in the dark truck in a dark alley. My parents were yelling at each other. Their angry voices echoed over the silent neighborhood and the mantra I held in my head. I had made another bad choice. Now I had no money, lost some friends, and had a broken promise to boot. A quick calculation told me I had enough money for gas to drive back. I looked up, and the weight limit now mocked me with an answer I didn't want to hear. You brought this burden with you. I was tired, bone deep tired. The fatigue and heartbreak sat heavy. But tonight I will sleep. I can't decide right now anyway. And besides, I may have never been able to make a decent decision. I entered my parents' home. The darkness of the kitchen was my welcome. The home would have been partially remodeled. Most of the floors was a subfloor that imparted bits of themselves to stockinged feet. And the walls, they wore this kind of odd blue smear. I slept in the attic. I woke late after fitful stops and starts. Morning, I went downstairs to find some breakfast and was greeted with a hug by my mother. My siblings were at school. I was told to call my father, not my dad, father. Am I already in trouble? Sighs turned to gulps. The anxiousness creeped along my spine in a familiar pattern. I dialed the number 3 times before I let the call go through. I was advised that if I was to live there, I was to either get a job by the end of the week or enroll in the local community college. The catalog is on my dad's desk, or I might as well go. Oh, my mind raced. College? I barely made it out of high school. Job less than a week? Not likely. Okay, I squeaked. I understand. But I didn't. Fresh tears bathed my face. These weren't tears of despair. These were made out of fear. I can't do this. I can't do what he asks. I'll disappoint him. I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. How am I supposed to figure that out? The worst part? I won't get his love and acceptance again. I grabbed the catalog. Where to even begin? I looked out the window to the moving van filled with my possessions and another 10-hour drive. Chewing my tongue, I mumbled to myself, I'm already here. Over a bowl of cereal, a single thought percolated. I could take one class. He didn't say how many. That doesn't feel so overwhelming. So, what class looks good? With pen in hand, I circled one class after another. It actually was kind of fun. Now possibilities loomed. I planned out how the classes would fit together. I called them back with pride this time instead of fear and announced the 3 classes I wanted to take. Would that be okay? Yes. Yes. What a delicious word. He would leave a check for the tuition, and I was to pay for books and incidentals. That's fair. That's fair. I could do that with the money I had left. So, this is what future felt like, at least mine. It felt broad and bright. I went to unpack the trailer. Join me now as we sing hymn 5, verses 1 and 4, and then Martha will speak.
There is no use trying, said Alice. One can't believe impossible things. I dare say you haven't had much practice, said the Queen. When I was your age, I always did it for half an hour a day. Why, sometimes I believed as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. A few years ago, my youngest daughter gave me that quote by Lewis Carroll on my birthday. She said it was because I taught her that impossible things were possible. But one can't believe impossible things, can one? Or can one? Well, it is impossible that I am standing up here today. Literally. It defies all odds. I am very aware that I could have died by my own hand, and that other people did not expect me to ever be able to function normally. I have often revisited this in my mind, a well of hope, a reminder to never feel hopeless about anyone. Where do I begin? There are stories embedded in stories. There are bare-bone facts. But it is the stories that have the power to transform the facts into meaning. I grew up in Ames. My father was a professor. My family was one of extremely high moral and religious expectations. I was a quiet child with a huge imagination. I could occupy myself for hours, which meant I was never in the way. I was third in the family of 4 children, all 4 years apart. My brother, the oldest and only boy, is brilliant. I, on the other hand, was not. At age 13, I still could not read. My parents never thought anything was wrong. I was quiet, well-mannered, and obedient. I could cook, and I could sew. What more could they want in a daughter? No one believed I could do any better in school than I did, until one of my 7th grade teachers took an interest and simply said, she believed in me. That unexpected belief inspired a great effort to live up to her faith. I am eternally grateful to her. I not only learned to read, but I became a voracious reader. I devoured books and began to write poetry. But I was quiet so no one in my family noticed, not even when my grades escalated. Now, when you grow up feeling stupid, it is hard to get over feeling stupid. I found solace in art and the creativity of my hands, but I was still constantly trying to prove to myself that I was good enough. I had always been thin, but when I was 17, I had gained a little more weight than I wanted. So I set my mind on losing it. I had wonderful success, and the kids at school complimented me. I was elated. I had no real friends, so the enthusiastic words bolstered my attempts to master my new form of perfection. By the time I graduated from high school in 1972, I was 68 pounds. I was on death's door. The doctors back then were clueless. They put me in the hospital, but they had no idea what they should do to help me. It took a long time, but I did finally gain some weight. But that was when my world completely collapsed. It was as if a sinkhole had suddenly opened and I plummeted into a bottomless abyss. An abyss so dark, so void, and so deep that dying quickly seemed better than dying a slow, agonizing death. The doctors told my parents it was catatonic schizophrenia. My mind-body had literally shut down. Light hurt my eyes. I recoiled when touched. It hurt as if I had been hit. I curled up in the fetal position and entered the realm of oblivion. The doctors told my parents it was hopeless. No one recovers. They told them to commit me to a mental hospital. My mother refused. I am thankful to her. The first generation antipsychotics they wanted me to take would have caused permanent dyskinesis, like Parkinson's disease. The electric shock therapy they had ordered kills brain cells. I am not going to go into the 2 years I spent at home, except to say that I did finally come out of my catatonic state, but I continued to cycle into dark, suicidal depression and debilitating panic attacks. Consequently, I entered into a marriage with a man whose drug addiction led him to be physically, emotionally, verbally, and sexually abusive. The marriage lasted 22 years. 22 years of struggle, isolation, and fervent prayers. Although my outer world did not change, my inner world began to change with the birth of my daughters. I realized I could not die and leave them in the hands of a father who could not possibly take care of them. Not only had I been taught to pray, not divorce, but I simply could not leave because he said he could prove by my medical records that I was mentally unstable and he would get custody. I loved them with my whole being. The day I held my oldest daughter for the first time was the day the impossible took root, and watered by hopes and prayers, it grew and became possible. So does that mean my depression vanished? No. Does that mean it was assuaged? No. It meant that I realized the pain and darkness was my body malfunctioning, not my soul. For the next 8 years, I battled the depths of my own darkness. I felt alone. I lost 3 consecutive pregnancies before I witnessed the miracle of my youngest daughter's birth. And in the depths of darkness, my 2 daughters were the breath of my prayer, the love giving me strength to survive and courage to find an answer. And here I am. So how did I get out of this abyss? Well, when my youngest daughter was a year old, I found myself seeking medical help again. However, in 1983, the answers were still dubious. I finally abandoned the doctors and set out in search of understanding the brain and how it works, hoping to discover a solution. I had no internet to consult, so finding answers was more difficult. I read anything about the physiology of the brain I could get my hands on and eventually troubleshot and began a scientific experiment with me as the lab rat. Years later, I learned that what I had done is called precursor loading. It's a pushing of the biosynthetic pathways to restore the chemical balance in my brain. But how I did it is not the purpose of my message today. I want to give you a more universal message, one of hope. So here's my analogy, my metaphor instead. Every child can tell you the life cycle of an insect that undergoes metamorphosis. Egg, larva or caterpillar, cocoon or pupa or chrysalis, adult insect. But what happens inside the cocoon? Does the caterpillar begin to transform, grow little wings and simply change forms? No. Here is the essence of what happens. During development in the egg, the caterpillar grows 19 highly organized discs that in 1864 August Leopold Weismann named imaginal discs. The discs correspond to the body parts of the adult insect. There are discs for eyes and wings, legs, etc. During the life of the caterpillar, it grows and molts several times. Then at just the right time, hormones kick in and start the cocoon or pupa or chrysalis stage. Then an amazing thing happens. The caterpillar releases enzymes that digest, dissolve all of its tissues except the imaginal discs. The caterpillar, in essence, dies. No more caterpillar. No real insect form at all. It would look to the naked eye like an amorphous mess. However, that is when the imaginal discs are activated like stem cells and begin to multiply and connect using the protein mess from the digested caterpillar for food. An entirely new creature is made from the death of the caterpillar. My life in a metaphor, a powerful metaphor, true, real, scientific, but what emotional, spiritual, and artistic power. Imaginal discs hidden from view in the lumbering body of the caterpillar. There is unseen magic hidden in the depths of that little creature eating in the shadow of the underside of the leaf. Some people are like that. Not every person. Some people simply grow into an adult version of themselves. But others whose lives might look hopeless or destructive, they have imaginal discs hidden in their soul that, if allowed, if the cocoon forms and the old life is digested and used for food, then the imaginal discs, oh, isn't that a great name? They take over, and metaphorically, a beautiful butterfly or moth can emerge in the spring. I was like that. I had to have all of the molts as well as the dark winter experience of the cocoon spun from my own body, and then die using all of the past for food to grow into a new creature. Me, this dyslexic, once schizophrenic, suicidal, isolated, terrified, ignorant woman who had never really worked outside the home or been independent, found strength and courage in her love for her children to find healing, to raise 2 amazing daughters, to eventually leave the marriage, to simultaneously work and go to school, to study neuroscience, and to graduate in 2003 with honors, having taken courses no one believed I ever could have understood, let alone loved and excelled in. One can't believe impossible things, or can one? Now maybe we can Thank you. Now maybe we can sing hymn number 18.